He built a billion-dollar empire on one rule.
Weakness has no place in my building.
So when he saw her, mop in hand, braids pinned back, invisible to everyone, he made an example of her, fired her.
You are fired.
Publicly, brutally, in front of 200 employees. She didn't scream. She didn't cry. She looked him dead in the eyes and smiled like she'd been waiting for this exact moment. By midnight, he would understand why. By morning, she would own him. The 42nd floor of Voss Industries smelled like ambition and fresh leather. The kind of place where the air itself seemed to know its worth. Zara and Becky had learned to move through it like water through stone. Quietly, leaving no trace, disturbing nothing. 6:15 in the morning, and she was already on her second circuit of the lobby, her reflection ghosting across the polished marble floor, in the blue half-light before the city fully woke. She liked these hours. The building belonged to no one yet. By 7:30, that was no longer true. Caden Voss stepped off the private elevator, the way he always did, like the floor owed him something, for accepting his weight. Charcoal suit, jaw set, eyes already calculating, the return on every second he breathed. He moved through the lobby, without seeing the three people in it, the way a man moves through furniture, and then he stopped. His gaze found the glass panel. Beside the reception desk, a smudge, small, almost nothing, a ghost of a handprint near the lower corner, probably left by a courier 30 minutes ago. The silence that followed lasted exactly 4 seconds.
Who is responsible for this floor?
The receptionist's eyes dropped. The security guard near the door found something urgent to study on his wristwatch. Zara straightened slowly, turned, and met his gaze without hurry. "I am," she said. What came next lasted less than 3 minutes, but it had the density of something much longer. His voice didn't rise. It never needed to. Caden Voss had long understood that coldness cuts deeper than volume. He spoke with the surgical precision of a man who had fired hundreds and felt nothing each time, dismantling her in front of 200 employees who had begun filtering in for the morning, most of them freezing mid-step, coffee cups suspended halfway to mouths, watching. Replaceable, invisible, never mattered. A liability to the standard this building represents. He said these things, the way someone reads a weather report. Zara set the mop handle against the wall, with the care of someone, setting down something valuable. She unclipped her ID badge, placed it on the reception desk, smoothed the front of her uniform once, a gesture so composed it made several people in the lobby unconsciously hold their breath. And then she looked at him, not with anger, not with the wounded dignity of someone absorbing a wound. She looked at Caden Voss, the way a chess player looks at the board. 3 moves before checkmate, with something almost like tenderness. For the distance, he didn't yet know he'd already lost. She smiled. It lasted only a moment. Then security was at her elbow, and she walked toward the elevator without being guided, back straight, braids catching the morning. Light flooding through the tower's eastern glass. The elevator doors closed. She was already dialing before they reached the ground floor.
Tell the board to clear their schedules tonight,
She said quietly. Tonight. The call went to 7 board members simultaneously at 4 p.m. Terse official, bearing the letterhead of Hargrove and Lane, one of the 3 most quietly powerful law firms on the eastern seaboard. No explanation, only a time, a location, and the particular legal language that made grown men cancel dinner. Reservations without asking questions. Caden wasn't the one who called it. That detail alone had kept him rigid in his chair for 5 hours. By 9 o'clock, the boardroom on the 44th floor held 7 of the most expensive suits in the city, all of them wearing the same careful expression, the one that meant they were afraid, but had not yet decided to show it. Hargrove's senior partner, a silver-haired woman named Elspeth Cole, set a bound document at the center of the table with the unhurried manner of someone who had long stopped needing to perform authority. She let them read the cover page first. Then Becky Trust, established 15 years ago, sealed by mutual agreement. Of the original Voss Industries co-founders, a clause buried so cleanly in the company's founding architecture that 3 separate legal teams had spent a decade never finding it. 51% of the founding shares, controlling interest, never transferred, never dissolved. Caden's face had gone the color of the marble lobby 42 floors below. The name beneficiary, Elspeth said, sliding a single page toward the center of the table, has been verified, notarized, and is prepared to assume her position effective immediately. Nobody spoke. Then the boardroom doors opened. She wore black, tailored, clean, authoritative, in the way that needed no announcement. Her braids fell loose around her shoulders. She carried nothing. She needed nothing. Zara Adiz and Becky walked the length of the room without looking at Caden Voss, pulled out the chair at the head of the table, and sat down. Elspeth Cole gave him the choice. The following morning, in a room with no windows and no witnesses, the kind of room built specifically for conversations that couldn't afford an audience, resign with a structured exit package, and walk away from Voss Industries permanently, or retain his executive position, his salary, his office on the 42nd floor, and report directly to the new majority shareholder. Caden Voss had never reported to anyone in his life. He signed a retention agreement at 9 a.m. Zara didn't acknowledge the small victory. She was already working. Within 48 hours, 3 of his flagship decisions had been quietly, methodically reversed. The outsourcing contract that would have gutted the logistics division canceled. The junior staff salary freeze he'd implemented in Q3 lifted. The acquisition of a floundering tech firm he championed for 18 months purely for the optics of expansion suspended pending independent review. Each reversal came with documentation, data, and a rationale so airtight that the board approved. Every measure without a single dissenting vote. She never raised her voice. She never needed to. The staff noticed within the first day. Not with fanfare, with something quieter and more durable than that. People began arriving a few minutes early. Conversations in hallways lost their guarded edge. The receptionist who had stared at her shoes during Caden's eruption 2 mornings ago now gave Zara a small nod each morning. That meant something neither of them needed to name. Caden watched all of it from the periphery of rooms. He used to command, fury sitting in his chest like something calcify. He told himself it was temporary. A performance. That she would overreach, stumble, expose whatever angle she was running. He accessed her private files on a Thursday evening, alone in his office, using an administrative backdoor he'd quietly maintained for years. He moved through layers of encrypted folders with the focused patience of a man expecting to find a weapon. We found instead stopped him cold. Financial models dating back 4 years. Internal memos she had never sent. A shadow audit she'd conducted from a cleaning supply room on the 39th floor, documenting every fracture in the company's foundation and the precise interventions that had quietly kept Voss Industries solvent through 3 near-collapse moments Caden had never even known were happening. She hadn't been waiting for this moment. She had been building toward it, one silent morning at a time. He should have closed the files. That would have been the intelligent thing. To step back from the back door he'd breached, to restore the folders to their original state, and pretend the Thursday evening had never happened. Instead, Caden Voss sat in the blue glow of his monitor until well past midnight, pulling thread after thread from the architecture of a story he was only now understanding he'd been living inside of. The wire transfer was buried in a subsidiary ledger from 13 years ago, cross-referenced against a holding company, with no public footprint. Anonymous capital moved cleanly and without condition, arriving 4 days before Voss Industries would have missed payroll for the first time in its history. He had been 26 that year, newly installed as deputy executive, watching his father age a decade in a single quarter. He remembered the morning Roland Voss had walked into the office looking like a man who had been handed a lifeline. He couldn't explain. He had never explained it. Caden ran the holding company through 3 different search layers before the name surfaced. A single registered director, a 24-year-old woman who had liquidated her late mother's estate, a modest inheritance, and every account bearing her name. To move capital into a company that didn't know she existed, Zara Mbeki had saved Voss Industries. At 24 years old, she had asked for nothing. She had taken a job mopping its floors. He sat with that for a long time. Then he found the letters. They were scanned and filed without label, nested inside a folder he would have missed if he hadn't been looking for something else entirely. Handwritten correspondence on heavy cream paper, the kind his father had used for nothing casual. Dates spanning 11 years. A relationship built in the margins of the public record between Roland Voss and the young woman he had clearly known, clearly trusted, and clearly never introduced to his son. Caden read every letter. He read them twice. In the last one, dated 4 months before his father's death, Roland's handwriting had grown unsteady, but the sentence was precise, deliberate, underlined once with the care of a man choosing his final words on a subject carefully. When the time comes, trust her. She knows what I couldn't say. Caden leaned back in his chair and stared at the ceiling of the office that had never, it turned out, been entirely his. It took Derek Price 11 days to move. Caden had worked alongside the CFO for 7 years and had always respected the particular coldness of his competence, the way Price processed risk the way other men processed air automatically, without visible effort. He understood now that he had mistaken calculation for loyalty. They were not the same thing. The offshore account surfaced in 3 financial publications simultaneously on a Tuesday morning, which meant the leak had been coordinated with the kind of precision that required weeks of preparation. The narrative was clean and damaging. A woman with no formal executive history, no public financial record, no verifiable corporate credentials, had manipulated a sealed trust instrument to seize control of a billion-dollar institution. The word infiltrator appeared in 2 headlines before noon. By evening it was everywhere. The board fractured along the fault lines that had always existed beneath its surface. 2 members called for an emergency injunction. 1 resigned. The remaining 4 went silent in the way that meant they were waiting to see which direction the wreckage fell before choosing their ground. Zara said nothing publicly. She arrived at the 42nd floor at her usual time, moved through the building with the same unreadable composure, and held every scheduled meeting without acknowledging the storm assembling outside the glass. She found Caden in his office at 6 in the evening. She didn't sit. She placed a sealed envelope on his desk with the quiet finality of someone completing a long errand. Open it when you decide who you are. She left without elaboration. He opened it that night. Inside, a single document, 6 years of transactions, methodical and damning. Price's architecture, built on falsified approvals. Every forged signature bore Caden's name. She told him on a Friday evening, when the building was empty and the city below had softened into its nighttime version of itself. Lights blurring at the edges, the skyline doing its best impression of something peaceful. Zara sat across from him for the first time, without the geometry of power between them. No head of a table, no document to present, no audience to perform composure for. She folded her hands and began speaking with the measured cadence of someone who had rehearsed this moment for years and was now discovering that rehearsal had not made it easier. Her father's name was Emeka Mbeki. He had built a logistics company over 20 years, small, disciplined, debt-free, the kind of business that survives on integrity because it has nothing else to insulate it. In 2004, a network of Shell subsidiaries began systematically underbidding his contracts, filing spurious regulatory complaints, and redirecting his largest accounts through instruments that were, on paper, entirely legal. Within 3 years, the company was gone. The family's land holdings in 2 countries were absorbed through mechanisms her father never fully understood before he died trying to. She had spent a decade understanding them for him. The wire records covered 4 filing boxes. The Shell company network mapped across 11 jurisdictions. The names at the operational level were recognizable. Former Voss board members, a dissolved consulting firm, a pattern of coordination too precise to be coincidental. She had documented all of it from the inside. From the floor she mopped and the conversations she was invisible enough to overhear, building a case with the patience of someone who had already lost everything worth rushing for. "I didn't come for the shares," she said. "I came for the names." Caden had been listening without interrupting, which was not something he did naturally. He watched her slide the final document across the desk, the organizational chart at the center of it all, the originating architecture of a corruption network 2 decades old. He looked at it for a long moment. The name at the center was one he knew better than his own. Roland Voss. His father hadn't stumbled into the network, hadn't been complicit at the margins, hadn't looked the other way at the wrong moment. The documentation was unambiguous. Roland Voss had drawn the blueprint. Caden's face went the color of old paper. The decision didn't require a conversation. Caden looked up from the document, looked at Zara, and something that had been load-bearing inside his particular architecture of self, the pride, the reflexive dominance, the lifelong conviction that he had built something worth protecting, quietly gave way to something more honest. "Tell me what you need," he said. What followed was neither clean nor cinematic. It was 31 days of legal filings, emergency board sessions, forensic accountants working in shifts, and the particular exhaustion of people dismantling something that had been constructed specifically to resist dismantling. Price retained 4 lawyers and spent the first week projecting confidence. The confidence did not survive the second week, when Czar's documentation entered the formal record and 2 of his offshore partners, suddenly aware of how thoroughly they had been mapped, began cooperating with investigators. Caden testified twice. The second time, he sat across a table from men he had considered colleagues and laid out his father's blueprint with the flat precision of someone who had made his peace with the cost of honesty before entering the room. It was the hardest thing he had ever done in a building full of hard things. Zara sat 3 seats away and did not look at him with pity, which was the only thing he needed from her in that moment. They restructured Voss Industries from the operational skeleton outward, every department touched by the network reviewed, every contract traced, every subsidiary either cleaned or dissolved. 3 board members resigned under pressure. 2 faced formal proceedings. The company that emerged from the process was smaller, quieter, and structurally sound in a way it had never been during the years it had been performing soundness. The staff, who had watched all of it from their various floors and departments, said very little. They worked harder. That was the thing Caden noticed, that people who feel the ground beneath them is real tend to build on it differently. In the margins of those 31 days, something else was happening that neither of them named. It lived in the hour past midnight when they were the last 2 people on the floor, in the way she handed him coffee without being asked, in the way he began to understand, slowly, then all at once, that he had been looking at the world through a window she had been living outside of her entire life. He didn't speak of it. Neither did she. But it was present in every room they shared, patient and undeniable, the way certain true things wait. The morning after the final board resolution passed, Caden arrived at 6:15, her hour, the hour he had learned to keep, and found her chair empty. No files left open, no coffee cooling on the desk, just an envelope centered on the table with his name on it, and inside, a single sentence in her handwriting, precise and complete. My work here is done. And that is where we leave them. Zara and Becky walked into that building invisible, and walked out having dismantled everything that was never built right to begin with. She didn't come for revenge. She came for truth. And somewhere along the way, she left a door open that neither of them had planned for. The chair is empty, but the story isn't over. If this story found you at the right moment, if Zara felt like someone you know, or someone you're becoming, hit that like button. It tells me to keep writing women like her. Drop a comment and tell me, was Caden redeemable? Or did he wait too long to choose the right side? If you're new here, welcome. This is the kind of storytelling we do. Subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss the next story. And if you want to know what happens next, whether Caden finds her, whether she lets him, and what she does with a company she never wanted to keep,